It's a storm brewing outside, and Doc and Prof are live with more debate amongst friends. Tuesday's edition of Dark Side of the Ring. We got Blood and Wire. Onita's FMW. But before we get into that, we got the Professor John Gotti, the King of Energy, the Troll Master, the Data Analyzer, and just of his own fate. The Terminator, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. Get your brooms out. It is a hard time cleaner.
Wow, I'm the hard time cleaner now? Dang. I mean, I don't come from Cobb County, Georgia, but
That guy's cleaning up all the hard time.
oh no. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that guy over there. I am the best
Yeah.
podcasting machine, least hype machine, but that guy right there, podcasting beast, reigning, defending, undisputed podcasting champion of the world. And always tranquilo, Doc, El Idolo. It may be stormy outside, but I'm staying dry during this quiet storm. For those that enjoy some smooth jazz back in the day, CD 101.9. But Doc, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I learned a little bit more about Blood and Wire today. Wow. Never even heard of FMW, man. That's how much of a bum wrestling fan I've
This is like way back in the day.
but obviously I was 4. So,
Yeah, like it was
but
way
even
back then.
still, like the fact that, Terry Funk and,
Mm-hmm.
some of these guys were there, and it's like, I never even heard of this place. But then
Yeah.
again, it makes sense because, like, by the time we heard of people, obviously ECW is like well into the future of this, but it's just interesting to see that this is where a lot of these guys got their first starts. Even Jericho saying that he was there.
Yep.
So obviously in the '80s we had WWF and New Japan, and I guess we had All Japan Pro Wrestling as
Yep.
well.
All Japan Pro Wrestling.
Now of course I don't remember ever hearing about All Pro. Obviously I know New Japan now. Of course at the time, you just never know.
Yeah. I
But,
mean, there's some
but
other promotions out there too, but those was like the top three. Of course, don't forget about WCW in the 90s as well too.
well, yeah, I mean, it took a long time for them to really get started. Now, I mean, they were a slow start.
Yeah.
Of course, 10 years, 10 years later, or not even 10 years later, what, 4 or 5 years later, we kind of know like what happens, right? I mean, they kind of take off, but let's get into this episode, boy.
Yeah, man. What was your thoughts on this episode?
So there are a lot of thoughts. Um, a lot of thoughts. I feel like my picture background kind of describes like the whole show, just taking it to the next level. And people can't see it, but you will see it because it's going to be today's thumbnail.
Of
It's
course it
the
is.
fire scene. This whole show is just like it was just. How can I even say it?
Up in
It
smoke,
was just
not
so.
up in smoke too.
Yeah, it was just an expansive like I can't even put it into words, man. It's like it started out as like a little sparkler, and then it just like,
Yeah,
like
they kept pushing the envelope to see how far they can go.
not even pushing the envelope. I mean, pushing the whole post office, man. I mean, God. It was just like, hey, we're gonna put barbed wire in the ring. It's like, oh no, no, we're gonna make an explosive ring. Oh no, no, let's just set the whole ring on fire. This ring is on fire, right?
It was a lot.
It was a lot. So, I mean, let's talk about the beginning, right? Mr. Onita obviously went out wrestling. On and off. I mean, obviously injuries, so on and so forth. Learning from Terry Funk, going to
Mhm.
Texas, coming back, and then I believe somewhere in there before he started FMW, he challenged a martial artist, which I can't. They said the name, but I cannot remember the name of the martial artist that he fought in like a trilogy. Which today we would be like, oh my god, why are they fighting so many times?
Yeah.
But at that time, it's like, hey, he actually, they actually put on a good show. People loved it. But he also noticed the fan and crowd interaction, which is obviously a wrestler's dream, right? A wrestler wants that fan interaction. Terry Funk talks about it. Sabu talks about it. It's like, hey, if we have to go out there and put our bodies on the line, but at the end of the match, everybody's standing and shouting, or everybody's doing, given the reaction that we want,
Mhm.
that's success. And even Mrs. Foley's baby boy, Mick Foley, he said, we cared more about fan safety than our own. So as long as the fans were safe, we didn't care. And it's like,
Yeah, because they're there to try to provide a great show for the viewers out there. But they
right,
also want to make sure that the viewers don't get skewed by a errant
exploding,
spike or
right,
a piece of exploding debris or something like that.
right. So there's a lot of storytelling, even within this episode. I mean, it was such a build up. It was almost like we were getting worked as we're watching the episode. Because you think about it, like you start off, like I said, with Mr. Onita here, obviously nonstop baby face, going in, bringing in Terry Funk, which people in Japan love the Funks, um, and then you have this trilogy with this martial artist, and then you start FMW, and you say, hey,
Yes.
we're gonna bleed all over this ring, all right, guys, we're gonna bleed all over it.
Well,
Don't you
you
worry.
skipped over one thing. So
Okay,
before he
I knew
started
see, that's what I'm
FMW,
saying. Keep
it's
me,
fine. It was fine. So before he
yeah.
started FMW, he actually had a injury that occurred because
Ah, that's what it
beforehand
was.
he was he was actually was a really good technical wrestler. He was a high
Mhm.
flyer.
High flyer.
People put him in that discussion with like Dynamite Kid in the
Mm,
ring, not Dynamite Kid outside the ring. We already talked about
sure.
that.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
And I believe it was after he finished up the match and he just did something simple, like just he just jumped off the apron to get to the floor,
Mhm.
and a bone pierced the skin of his knee, like his whole kneecap shattered. It was gruesome. Yes, we are going to make sure that this is not safe for kids to listen to, so
Of
don't worry
course.
about it.
Of course.
Um, so you know, after that, it allowed him to explore some of those influences from Terry Funk back in Amarillo, Texas,
Mhm.
as Doc was talking about. And it, led to him uh, getting someone named Masashi Oyagi
Mhm.
to compete with him within the ring. And that kind of began that whole FMW stuff. Like it was kind of
That's what it
what
was.
you would see in like UFC, MMA type of things, but they would have this mixed
Mhm.
martial artist competing against. Of course, that's what the M stand for, martial
Right.
art. And then it evolved from there. So please, Doctor T.
So, and I kind of like that because you think about what Vince McMahon was doing during his time. He's bringing in all these actors, and he's bringing in, obviously in this time frame, somewhere in this time frame, you got Mr. T, right? You got, you're bringing in all these people, and here we go. I like that. I'm glad you found Oyagi because I was like, for the life of me, trying to figure out and find this guy's name. But it it was perfect because it does mesh martial arts with wrestling, and the fact that this artist took a power
And
bomb was
wait, before Doc continue, legitimate martial artists, not
right. Uh,
hey, let's do Last Dragon Kias out
right.
there and pretend that I'm a martial artist.
What the? That's
No,
so
no,
terrible.
no. We can't. We can't.
No, that's what they did in Last
I
Dragon. That's
Oh
why
no,
I was
and
like,
I know that, but we can't do that.
yeah.
We have to be
I
careful.
was like, what in the world? But
Doc, Ric Flair
we'll
got
digress.
canceled. Okay, we
I
can't
know.
say most of the
I
stuff
know. You
anymore.
said
We
Last Dragon.
definitely
You
can't
said
do
Last Dragon.
that.
All right, let's carry on then. I guess let's carry on. So we move on to FMW. Now, again, I never heard of it. I've
Hmm.
never seen these matches. I've never heard of a lot of the people that they talked about. And we talked off the stream, which is so funny. We were talking last week about what other stories you want to hear. And what was it that I said? I said, I want to hear about the Iron Sheik,
Yep.
and it just so happens that the Iron Sheik shows up in here. And that's why I'm like, I've never heard the Iron Sheik getting burned in a match. You know what I mean? Like, where the heck is this at? I didn't even know Sabu and the Iron Sheik were freaking related
Yes.
until today. I was
Yes.
today years old when I found that out. So, so now we got the. I don't want to say the birth, of course, because obviously it existed already, but we have the. I'm going to say the maturation
Hmm.
of the death match. Could you agree with that? The maturation of the death match. This is when it's starting to mature, starting to
I would say the
literally explode.
refinement of the death
Refinement
match.
at this particular, and
Yes.
even saying that in
And and
1989 or
and
early
also just to
90s.
add another quick Gotti note too, Doc is talking about the original Sheik, not the one that everyone is
Right,
used to hearing all the time, who always
right,
calls Hulk Hogan a jabroni.
right. And again, never heard of the original Sheik until today. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why I'm saying, like, this is the kind of story that Doc wants to hear and see. So Vice, Dark Side people, Doc wants to see the Sheik, the original Sheik. But we kind of go forward here. Obviously, matches, blood, exploding rings, barbed wire, all over the place. I mean, I guess for me,
Hmm.
because we've already grown past hardcore ECW, falls count anywhere, no disqualification, first blood, uh, chair shots. We've gone through all of these phases. Now we're in this PC age where a lot of this has been toned down due to concussions and CTE and all this other stuff. But listening to Sabu talking about, hey, I stopped going to the hospital and I just started crazy gluing my skin together and pretty much slapping tape on it.
Yep.
Um,
Which we've seen that in one of his matches in ECW actually.
right. Is nuts.
Hmm.
I will say this, and this is where it gets kind of crazy because I know in that time we had a lot of steroids, and um,
Steroids is
I,
like bottom of the bottom
y-
tier compared to the other
yeah,
stuff wrestlers were doing.
right. But I'm also happy and saddened, of course, to see that a lot of these people that were in these matches, number one, thank God they're still alive, right?
Of
A lot of
course.
them are still allowed to tell their stories. But number two, then you think about the people who aren't alive
Hmm.
due to other things. And it's like, my goodness, like these people literally were setting themselves on fire, barbed wire, loss of blood. Like, I mean, obviously Mike Awesome, unfortunately, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. But it's like, my goodness, this is a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever sat down and fully watched a barbed wire match or an explosive ring match. Have you?
Yes.
Okay.
And no, we're not talking about
Yeah, no, we're not talking about that.
no,
Crap.
no.
That that was like a kid's toy
Well,
of a ring.
again, and we won't get into that. Like, it was supposed to
It
be
was really
better than
bad.
that. The match itself was fine. It was the finish, and you always hear me tell you this. It's always about how the pay per view finish that really
Right.
matters instead of the entirety of the event.
Agreed. I mean, but tell me about do you remember your first experience seeing it?
I believe it was a Terry Funk match. Actually, it was my
Okay.
first exploding barbed wire death match.
Hmm.
I believe it was Terry Funk. I forgot who he faced, but I remember that because the countdown hit zero and the entire ring exploded. It was awesome.
I mean, would that have possibly been this one? That would not this that you're seeing, but the one that was in this where
It's hard for me to remember. I think I was like 13 when I first watched it. So, I'm getting up there in age now, so I can't
yeah,
really.
13 is a long time ago there. Wow.
Yeah.
I hate that it's so long ago too, by the way. Really quick sidebar. Somebody played a clip from the Any Given Sunday yesterday and it said 1999 and I was like, "Oh my god, 99." So you say 13, I can't even oh my that was freaking 98, 99 for me. That's so crazy.
Yep.
Um, but I digress. So, we're kind of moving on, right? We got exploding rings. And now we move on to this. Hey, we're going to just light the whole ring on fire.
Hmm.
Why the heck would you light the whole ring on fire?
Shock factor.
To a point where now, obviously, years later, in the WWE, we got the Inferno match, right?
That's pale in
Right?
comparison.
Pales in
That
comparison, doesn't
pales in comparison.
it? But
Okay, the
uh,
only the only moment from the Inferno matches that I remember that is iconic is Undertaker jumping over the top rope and the flames
right,
jumping. That's the only thing that I remember from Inferno matches.
I
That's it.
think Kane's arm got burned or something.
Yes.
I think
His
that was
arm
the only
got
other thing.
burned, MVP's back got caught on fire, and of course the Fiend got completely lit on fire.
Hmm. Yeah, shout out to the Undertaker jumping over that flame, but this feels in comparison. But see, the thing about it is like this. I mean, it looks like, and you see my picture here that I have, and of course people got to
Hmm.
see this, but that looks like a tiki torch right there.
Yeah.
So it's just like so. I mean, it's like, hey, we're just gonna light this thing on fire, and they're sitting there, they're wrestling in this ring with barbed wire, right? And then you got this flame going absolutely bananas. You can't breathe, can't see, can't
Yep.
hear, and then eventually they just roll out the ring, and that's when the sheet gets burned, the original sheet. That's what we just talked about. How the heck? Where do you go from here, right? Like, where do you go from Burning Ring, bro? Like, where the heck do you go from
You make the
Burning
ring
Ring?
explode.
You make the whole ring explode. But let's go through this really quickly. And I didn't
Sure.
know before we get to the ring exploding because I think this was right before that. Might have been two or three things before that, but actually no, it was one thing before that. So Sabu, Mick Foley, Terry Funk, I believe, start talking about the Mafia
Yes. And I was
participation.
hoping you was going to talk about that. I was hoping you would mention
Um,
that.
so they were saying that they were possibly doing like money laundering through events, which is crazy
Yes.
because later
Now,
on when
now, before anything else, we have to make sure that the people are aware that this is not a slight against the Yakuza,
no, no,
and
at
we are
all.
not in support of the Yakuza either way. We're staying neutral.
Very neutral. Um, very, very neutral. But it sounds like, I mean, based on everything we were saying, is that Onita was taking a lot of money from, I guess, what he was getting, but the mafia at that time was getting the house pretty much, like the
Yes.
stadium,
Yes.
which is
Well,
it's not a
because
bad
the
deal,
Yakuza back in the day, and unfortunately, it's not as potent today as it was in yesteryear. They had control of a lot.
right?
Like, it's different than the mafias in America. Yeah, Yakuza legitimately.
had their
ran
hand in.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
I got you. That makes sense. So of
And it
course we
wasn't
get
it wasn't, the best kept secret either,
right. So of course
like
we
the
get to the
NCAA.
situation. Oh God, let's not. Yeah, let's not do that. So of course we get to the part where Sabu, it goes. They tell him like, hey, don't don't go and sit in VIP pretty much. Like, stay out of VIP practically. Um, and then he goes and sits over there anyway because he's like, hey, there's a whole bunch of seats over there. Like, I need to go over there and check it out. Look at all those seats. And of course they're like, you disrespectful little brat, and whatever. Of
Mhm.
course they probably didn't say brat, but then they jumped him. Now who comes out and saves the day? Freaking Mike Awesome.
Yep,
Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome's a big guy, so
he was. But he's
I
also a
mean, I
tough
don't.
guy too.
He is a tough guy. So that's when we talked about, obviously off stream, people getting punked. It's like, hey, is this one of those things where it's like, Sabu's getting jumped. We're counting this as getting punked. You know what I mean? Like he ain't fight back kind of thing. We ain't gonna go there.
That's a shaky slope to go down. Now, on one
Right.
side, if it's another wrestler who's doing that to Sabu, yes, he's getting punked. But if it's the freaking Yakuza,
Then that's different.
that's a totally different
That's why I
story.
want to make sure. Like, I just want to make sure. So Mike also saves the day.
Okay,
That
folks,
would
these
be
are one of the times where we would say it's okay to run away from a fight.
right. Right. Um, I always think about it like, hey, listen, if you get called up, man, you always got to at least take one person with you. That's
Pretty
it. That's the
much.
only thing. That's the only thing. That's the only thing you can do. Take one person with you. If you can't run, you gotta take one
You
person
gotta take
down,
at
and
least one down.
that person has to get the full brunt of everything going on.
I'll
But
pay my toll.
right, right, exactly. So now we have the nationwide fame. Obviously, he wanted to have what I would say is one of his final matches with Terry Funk. Obviously, is I'm gonna say childhood, you know, hero.
Yeah.
He's a babyface. Terry. I mean, face heel don't matter. You like him, you don't like him. It is what it is. So
In
they have this
fact,
match.
in fact, that match that you just mentioned was the exact same spot that happened with the John Moxley match.
Right,
It was
exact same thing. Yeah,
legitimately a
yeah.
homage to it.
I
It was
know.
to get
I figured that.
Onita to become a babyface.
Right.
It was
Um,
exactly this. In fact, I
but
believe that was the match actually.
that's what I'm thinking
That
when you
was
the
the
way you
match. That was the
yeah,
match.
the way you're describing it, that had to be it. Um, and the fact that I watched this and then it immediately made me think of AEW's finish,
Mhm.
and I was like, hmm, interesting.
Now
It would have
imagine
been
how much, different people reaction would have been if the
they
ring
pulled
was
it
supposed to
off,
do what it's supposed to do.
not like pew 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 pew. Ah, so then, of course, Mr. Onita retires. Tries to take the money, step away. He has a young star brewing here in
Hayabusa.
Hayabusa.
Hayabusa. Yep.
I feel like they said it differently, but that's neither here nor there. Hayabusa taking over. Hey, he's a young guy. He's moonsaulting. Nobody was doing a lot of moonsaults back
Mhm.
then. That's what they're saying. And then Mr. Arai takes over
Who had
FMW.
like one of the most prettiest Phoenix splashes out there.
Yes, I did see that. So Mr. Arai, Shoichi Arai, takes over FM.
Shoichi.
Shoichi. I don't got my glasses on, so they're right here. Takes over FMW, and I'm thinking at this particular point, honestly, I'm thinking that Onita, when he left and gave Arai FMW, I know Terry Funk said he didn't give him anything, but I'm thinking that Onita must have knew that the backing of the Yakuza was leaving. Like I'm thinking that's what happened because the way they described it was, hey, we went from these large crowds to these little baby crowds.
Yep.
So I'm thinking that the backing must have really been pulled. And here this guy is like, hey, I'm gonna give you this sinking ship. Here it is. So then obviously eventually he returns, brings people back with him, and then he exits again. I mean, it's just it's a lot in this episode. Like I said, it's a lot. Um,
Yeah. Well, and the second time he left FMW, it was basically a request to do so.
right. So I mean, the only other thing that I can think of that happened was, of course, Hayabusa's injury,
Hmm. Which happened
which
not
was
too long after Onita's exit.
right. So I mean, here we are. You got Hayabusa having this injury shortly after Anita leaves, and it's like this guy's supposed to take over. And I mean that moonsault, and we've seen people saved from that moonsault before, right? I think Jericho got saved. A
Hmm.
couple people got saved from this,
Well, and
and
that's
that's
why
in.
people have to quickly act from it because of this incident. It
Hmm.
was legitimately like right after this incident is when people started to pay more attention.
Right. And you have to be. I mean, you have to really, not just jump into the ring, and that's why, of course, they always tell us not to try this stuff at home. But these people try stuff at home all the time. But it's like if one false slip and it's like paralyzed.
It's over. I
It's
mean,
it's over.
paralyzed
Nah,
is,
yeah,
pretty bad, but like worse than paralyzation.
right. Death. So I mean, at the end here, we're talking about obviously career-ending injury. Um, the show's over. The show's over. Arai took loans from some loan sharks. They're like, hey, again from the Yakuza, because again, I really believe that the backing was pulled. So he takes a loan. Obviously, couldn't pay it back. um, and then he eventually he commits suicide, which is very very unfortunate because they even said it like your debt doesn't go away
Nope.
because of so they took the not only did they take the the money from the insurance, but then they still came after other money. So that part was really really sad at the end there, for that family. And of course, anytime you lose someone to suicide, it's always ridiculous. But wow, wow, what an episode. Like I said, like I said before, I think you push this one up or you end with this. You either push it up or you end with this. You don't stick this in the middle, right? But I'm interested to see now how they can top this episode.
I'm glad that you really enjoyed it though. I felt like after the Kenyan story. And by the way, this was like one of the lowest viewed episode
Right.
this season, which is
I felt it was like one of
actually
the
of the
shortest too.
series. I
It was
mean,
short too.
it was pretty short, but they got a
Yeah.
lot of information in.
They did. They did.
But the fact that this was like one of the lowest, that's crazy.
hmm
This is
People
actually a
don't
really, really good
know.
episode.
People don't know. That's why it's like, but people don't want to find out either.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
it's more of the lighter than the former.
But I mean, I know that people heard this on their favorite podcast platform, but if they didn't, they can always go to our website at www.hardtimes. Just kidding. www.debateamongstfriends.com to review this episode as well as all of the previous. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. We go over the Monday night matchup between the Las Vegas Raiders and those LA Chargers. Go, Chargers, go. But be sure to tune in tomorrow as we go over the news, the analysis, and the reads.
91 listens before 10K.